Welcome to GA325 Corporate Campaigns. This is Lecture 6, Part 1. Sequencing and pacing. Sequencing and pacing creates page flow. Pacing multi-page layouts means the visual rhythm and the speed optimize from page to page. The artist attempts to increase the pace from slow to fast or calm to a dynamic as the reader turns the page. Magazines can be very structured, having the same sections in the same order each month. In this situation, the designer must change the pace or vary the layout within a section in order to decrease the repetition. Two pacing approaches. We have two strategies. Strategies focused on structure and variation, and strategies that adjust content and presentation. So the common approaches to pacing are based on variation of structure and adjusting the presentation of the content. Using a magazine as an example again, a variation of structure of sections of the magazine might be achieved by using different grid layouts for different sections based on the desired character of each section. Variation of grids may be done with the spreads of one section. The purpose of the change in structure is to manipulate rhythm by changing scale or size of the imagery. Changing the presentation content. Changing the presentation of the content is the other pacing approach. This can be done in a number of ways. Altering color, visual imagery, value, and complexity can bring about changes in mood, emotional experience, and messages delivered by individual sections or spreads. Structural variation. Due to the problems of repetition when using grids, the designer must create structural variations which brings about dynamic results. The reader must be inspired to continue from one page to the next. Color, images, and typography can remain the same, but the framework progresses. Overall, progressive sequencing is using the same grid, but moving areas of text and images into alternating positions from page to page. Overall, syncopated sequences. This approach alters the layout of sequences of spreads using one type of organization in the first section, changing the organization in the next section, changing back to the layout of the first in an ABACA progression. This can be more complex, such as an ABACADABA, as long as each section does not totally change. Continuous variations. Continuous variations alters the position or size of text and images on each spread. The spreads all have a different layout, but on the same grid. Color areas can be moved around or take up different amounts of space to alter depth perception or breathe life into each spread. Section variation. Section variation can be done using two approaches. The first is to have each section of the publication use the same grid, but layout is done differently for each section. The other approach is to use a different grid for each section. A word of caution about the second approach: do not allow the unity of the overall project fall apart because each section looks so completely different. Instead of using placement, content presentation alterations change the visual qualities from page to page, spread to spread, or section to section. Color scale, use of visual objects, and complexity can all be altered to add excitement to the design. Changes in visual presentation can coincide with structural variations. For example, changing the scale of photos would change the layout logic. Content presentation may work on its own and not require any changes in structure. Color progression. A spread of section may use an overall color scheme of various shades of blue. The next section may use similar shades of green. This can continue to change throughout the publication or go back and forth in a rhythmic pattern. Blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, and so on. This does not mean using entirely different colors on each page, throwing all consistency out of the window. Scale progression. Taking the proportions of the pictures or text size or typography and varying them creates the scale progression. Similar to color progression, the sizes of the elements may continue to grow, then shrink again, or go back and forth to create a pattern. This may require an alteration in the grid structure. Text versus images. The text versus image approach alters the amount of space between images and text. One spread may use much more space for photographs, while the next one uses small images. This is similar to changing the structure of scale, but focuses on the proportion between the images and the type. Altering complexity. Syncopation means creating a rhythm or pattern that goes back and forth, while progression indicates constant change in one direction. Changing the complexity of the content can be done by starting with small plain type and slowly having it become larger, bolder, or more stylized. Simple arrangements of text can be more complicated or be too crowded on the page. Image treatment progression. Image treatment progression is the approach the designer may choose to change images from abstract to realistic, or change the subject matter of the pictures, or change the style of the illustrations. The last is risky because it may alter the mood of the section or disconnects the page from the rest of the section. This concludes this portion of the presentation, part 1.